there's 3 ways to grow a business: more customers, sell them more products, and more frequency. There's 3 ways to grow your wealth, and there's financial capital, relationship capital, mental capital. So if everyone chases financial capital, which is the hardest one to get and is the least important of the 3. So over the weekend, I built the lead page. I set up the Google pay-per-click campaign. I hopped on my dirt bike and I rode down to Cabo. I've been doing these tours for 20 years now. So I rode for 7 days. I get to Cabo. I opened up my laptop and it was just like, cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm rich. I'm back, baby.
All right, I had to bring Mark Moss on because we've been hanging out for the last day and just having conversation after conversation after conversation. And I learned a tremendous amount and I just want to share it. And so we're going to start today, I think, just talking about Bitcoin. I mean, obviously people are back talking about this in a big way, but this is something you never stopped talking about because you had a deep understanding of it very early on. And I just want to help people understand what it is, why it's so valuable, why it's going to be even more valuable moving forward, and the origins. I mean, I learned, you know, I knew a little bit about Bitcoin. I've invested in it. We can even talk about what that is.
You don't invest in money.
Right. I mean, it's not something I'm looking to sell. It's not something that I'm looking to cash flow, although you said you have ways to cash flow Bitcoin.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
So that's something that I'm interested in. And we were going through this, you know, basically book that you're writing or white paper or whatever you might call it on cash flowing Bitcoin. But first off, like, let's just talk about, you know, how you got into this world of teaching around, you know, Bitcoin specifically. I know you teach on a lot of other things, but how did you get so engaged in this?
Well, it started with Bitcoin, actually. So I've just been a serial entrepreneur, investor, real estate mostly, several businesses, high-tech medical equipment, e-commerce,
solar
lead generation. So I did lead generation for mortgage companies, debt companies, solar companies. We were the largest solar lead generator in the country at one point. But I had started my career in sort of early internet days. And so I've always been kind of this tech guy. I started e-commerce business in the early days. And so I say that because being an entrepreneur and sort of like a tech investor, Bitcoin sort of came onto my radar like it did a lot of people back in like 2012, 2013. So it came out in about 2009. But about 2012, 2013, it kind of came on my radar as it was going up. And I remember my business partner at the time was like, dude, we should probably buy this thing. And I looked at it and I watched it kind of going up, up, up. I didn't know what it was, but I just saw this new thing that was going up. And then it went up to about $1,000 and it crashed spectacularly, 90% drawdown. And I'm like, oh, okay, forget about that. And I never really put another thought into it.
What was that first crash? Was it just because it was on Chinese, you know, exchanges and people could steal it, or?
Bitcoin is extremely volatile. Volatility is a good thing.
Well, something that new is going to be extraordinarily volatile.
Right. And so as it gets bigger, the volatility goes down. But when it's a tiny, tiny, thin traded market cap, it just moves up and down. It's like penny stocks, right?
Yeah.
So it's just volatile. So we can't necessarily draw a conclusion as to why every time it went up or down.
But you didn't know what that big crash was.
I wasn't even paying attention. I just saw it going up and then I saw it crash and I didn't know why and I didn't pay attention. But if we backtrack just a little bit, I had made a lot of money. I'd been very successful in business, and real estate. 2008 wiped me out. And what happened is I was like, "Dang, what the hell?"
Basically, you're in real estate.
I was in real. Well, I had built up a medical equipment business. And I built up a e-commerce business. I had a Fortune 500 exit. I exited 2 businesses that were non-real estate. Plus, I had the real estate. But I had exited all my businesses. I had put all my chips in and I was all in on real estate. And I was basically retired. I was 30 years old, built this ocean view house, 6-car garage, elevator, just got married, had my first kid, and I was done. My goal was to be financially free by the time I was 30.
What did financial freedom mean to you?
Well, when I was 20, I've never filled out a resume. I've never had a job, but I did have one job. So I started working for my friend's dad's company my senior year in high school, and it was just an engineering company. 4 people were there. I didn't fill out a resume. I was just sweeping floors and whatever. And then they designed this new medical equipment, and I started working there just directly after high school, just in production. They started hiring people. We started producing this. And I remember within weeks or maybe months of this leaving high school and now working full time, and I thought, dang, is this what the rest of my life looks like? Like, this is it? I just come to an office every day? And I remember going, no, like that's not going to work for me. So financial freedom for me was not having to work for money. Right. And we talked about this earlier.
Because my belief, like, financial freedom is a state of mind. when money is no longer the primary reason or excuse we do or don't do something, where financial independence is a state of like, we have enough cash flow from assets to cover our expenses so we don't have to go to work that day.
So then I would say probably more independence. I was influenced by this guy who I never met, but it was my friend's neighbor, and he was always out with his boats and his RVs and his dirt bikes, and he's always going on these trips. And I was like, I want that lifestyle. And I chased a pro snowboard career, and I grew up racing dirt bikes, and I wanted to kind of do that, but there was no money in that. And so it was like, how could I achieve the lifestyle?
How old were you when you were doing the pro snowboard chasing?
Like 18, 19 years old. And but it was
still
like,
snowboard quite a bit.
I still snowboard. I still got to hold it down for the old guys. Yeah, I still hit all the jumps in the park. Taking my kids on a powder trip.
You've injured yourself doing these things, but you keep going.
I've had 8 major surgeries. I've got metal in all my limbs. Yeah, mostly from dirt bikes, not from snowboarding. But I wanted the lifestyle. That was what it was for me. So financial freedom for me was about having the lifestyle that I wanted to have, which was the thing when you're doing sports like surfing and snowboarding is like, when it's good, you just go. And you don't know when the waves are good, you go because they're only good for a day and then they're gone, and they may only be good. Right? And so it's like when you're dealing with like weather, like you have to have that freedom.
Yeah, I like it because you're mentioning lifestyle, and I feel like retirement is kind of in opposition to lifestyle, the way that most people go about it.
Yeah,
they go about it through budgeting, restraining, cutting back, saving, delaying, defer. It's like all this stuff that's about reduction, which is kind of based upon scarcity, and hoping that one day they finally get to live that life when they're, maybe not even able to enjoy that life because of the stress of never enjoying it along the way. So, it's kind of like you talked about, one of your early sites wasn't it the New Rich Strategies?
Yeah, New Rich Strategies.
Right.
And that came later. But so I started buying these bank-owned repos, fixing them up and flipping them. And then I was keeping a couple for rentals. And now here I am 19, 20, 21 years old. And I'm telling my friends, by the time I'm 30, I'll be retired. By the time I'm 30. And they're like, how? How the heck are you going to do that, right? And I'm like, easy. I'm making $1,000 a month on a rental. I need 10 of them.
I like that you want to be retired by 30. I was like, I want to be a multimillionaire by 30. I wasn't thinking clearly at that time about cash flow.
And for me, the word retirement at that point just meant that my cash flow was covering my bills.
Yeah.
That's what it meant.
Financial independence.
Financial independence. Yep. And I had read Robert Kiyosaki's book, so a lot of that came from there,
Get out of the rat race.
And so that was my goal. But the problem is somewhere along the way, I lost my way. And what happened is, maybe call it greed, call it that I've broken all my limbs riding dirt bikes, so my risk tolerance is very high. But as I started buying more and more real estate, I had 200 doors at one point. I built up multiple businesses. I had exits. I started selling my cash flow properties to get more capital to do big builds. So now I'm building 8-figure projects from the ground up, and
like developing, wow.
Right? And so
like developing to see people go on that kind of a ride, right?
And the problem in hindsight, obviously, is that I sold my safety net. I was at the circus on the high wire, but I didn't have the net down below me.
Yeah, we were talking about the thought of once someone's financially independent, there's more permission to be speculative at that point because it doesn't change your daily lifestyle.
Right.
It doesn't put the food you eat at risk.
But I sacrificed that in order
for big, vision. And so if you just kept that baseline, then swing for the fences on the vision versus get rid of the baseline.
That's right.
But we live and learn. I mean,
we live and learn. So I achieved my goal. And here I am, like I said, built a big house, whitewater views, 6-car garage, elevator, married, got the kid, bought the dream car I always wanted, all of those things.
What was that dream car?
It was just a Dodge Viper.
Nice.
Those
are awfully fast. I had a Bentley, and when I had it worked on once, they gave me a Viper to drive around. It was super fast.
I mean, I could have bought any car I wanted,
right.
but it's
not that expensive.
When that
for
car first came
car.
out, when it first came out, I was in high school, and I was like, oh my God, if I could just have that car. And so I was like, I'm just gonna buy it. And yeah, I could have bought a Lambo or whatever I wanted, but
my Ford Raptor better than any vehicle I've ever owned.
That's what I drive, a Ford Raptor.
We have far too many things in common.
Yeah, we do. So anyway, then 2008 came, and all of a sudden I find myself now, instead of sitting on 8-figure portfolio, I owe millions of dollars. But the worst part is that I had sold my businesses and my cash flow, so I had no income. And that was bad. So I had no way to make money.
All net worth that was being demolished with.
And I mean, I thought I was smart. I was sitting on over 8 figures. It's leveraged 60% LTV. The worst real estate market in history in California was 89 to 92. It dropped 30% over the 4-year period, but the worst 12-month drop in history was 6%. So I'm like, oh, if it's double the worst, 12%. If it's triple the worst, 18%. If it's 4 times the worst in history, it's 24. I'm good. It dropped 60%. 60%. Like, it just had never been seen before. I wasn't prepared for that. Yeah. I couldn't cover. It's basically what it came down to. But the point, going back to Bitcoin, is all of a sudden it shifted my mindset to like, dang, I'm pretty good at making money, but what is this whole financial world that I don't know anything about and I'm not paying attention to? What is this? What is the Fed? What's fiat currency? What is this macroeconomic environment that now has all this power over my life, but I don't even pay attention to it? And so I'm just head down, but I need to.
So the good thing about 08 is it drove you to learn.
Yeah, my message or messages or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, so, and being the dirt biker, and I'm just used to breaking my bones, and I come out of the hospital. When I got married, I remember right after I got married, we had our first kid, and I broke my leg really bad, spiral fracture, had to get a rod put in. And my mother-in-law is telling my wife, sell his bike while he's on the couch. Like, I'm laid up for a couple months and I have to hold my daughter, and she's like, sell the bike. But for me, I'm just like, let me just try that again. Right? And so I was like, okay, this sucked. It was painful.
So when you would go out to dirt bike or whatever type of bike, did you ever think, man, this could be a day that I get injured, or you just didn't worry about that?
Yeah, what happens is, and this is just in life in general, so like you start getting super confident and you get too overconfident, and then you get smacked. And then you come back very timid, and you're always afraid it's going to happen again. And
I remember broke my elbow just mountain biking, and the next time I went out, it wasn't even a technical trail. And I was like, I'm riding a bit dangerous because I'm too timid.
Yeah. But then over time, you start being too comfortable, and then just at the peak, then you get smacked down. And it's no different than business, right? I like to compare business to surfing and motocross because there's a lot of parallels I think we can learn, and it's an analogy that's easy to understand. But yeah, so certainly coming back. But I say that because there was a lot of friends that I had in the real estate niche at the time who never come back from that. Still, even to this day, have never come back from that traumatic, experience. But for me, it was kind of
that
like,
turned them into like scarcity runs their life.
Yeah. But for me, it was like I said, just, okay, well, this is never going to happen again. I'm going to commit to you, my wife. I'm going to commit to myself that I'm going to figure this out, and this is never going to happen again. Like, whatever that's going to take. And so we did, right? So we clawed ourselves out of that.
How'd she handle that whole?
She's a champion. You want to find out if you got a good partner? Go broke. She married me at the top, right? Like, I was like crushing it when we got together. Here we had this like a most amazing dream life. And now literally, I don't even know where we're going to live. I don't even have any income. How are we going to pay for our rental property? Like, what are we even going to do?
What was the turning point there? What did you do, and how'd that go?
So you talk about the 3 types of capital: relationship, mental, and financial. I talk about it the same, but in a little bit of a different light, but basically it's the same thing. And so there's 3 ways to grow a business: more customers, sell them more products, and more frequency. There's 3 ways to grow your wealth, and there's financial capital, relationship capital, mental capital. So if everyone chases financial capital, which is the hardest one to get, and it's the least important of the 3. Yep. And I had no financial capital. So what do? Well, luckily I still had relationships. And luckily I still had all the mental skills that I had before. So I had a buddy who had a mortgage company, and he's like, hey, Mark, I know you had this internet business that you sold, and you're pretty good on the internet. He's like, if you could help generate mortgage leads for me, I'm happy. When we make a couple $1,000 on a deal, I'm happy to split that with you or pay you a percentage of it. And I was like, okay. So I'd never done that before, but I had enough mental capital, enough mental skills on the internet to know roughly what I needed to do. And I had the confidence to know that I could figure it out. And literally, no joke, over a weekend, I went to, back then, so this was like 2009, there was no ClickFunnels or anything back then. There was lead pages. And I literally went to lead pages and I built like a lead capture page. I'd never built a lead capture page before, but like whatever. So I went there, and they want people to use the product. So it turns out they train you. It's kind of interesting. So I built the lead page, and then I needed Google pay-per-click ads. I had never run Google pay-per-click ads, but turns out they want you to use the product, so they have help as well. So over the weekend, I built the lead page. I set up the Google pay-per-click campaign. I hopped on my dirt bike, and I rode down to Cabo. I've been doing these tours for 20 years now. So I rode for 7 days. I get to Cabo. I opened up my laptop, and it was just like, cha-ching, 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 cha-ching. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm rich. I'm back, baby. And so I spent like 7-8 years just doing lead gen. That's where I got in, mortgage leads, debt leads, tax leads, and then eventually solar leads. And so I spent a lot of time there. But again, it was just because I had a relationship with somebody who said, hey, I have this opportunity. Do you want it? And I had the mental skills to be able to take advantage of that opportunity with no money. Service-based business.
Yeah.
So we start coming back, and I'm like, okay, I got to figure this out. I learned a concept that money's like energy. It doesn't disappear, it transfers. So when I lost my wealth, somebody else got it.
Right. And that's, by the way, that's an important concept because money isn't lost, it's transferred. So when people say they lost money, it's transferred, and they think though, most people are like, oh, that money's gone.
Yeah.
Instead of thinking, no, that ended up in someone else's hands.
If we were at a card game and I lost my money, it went to you or somebody else, right?
But just the word lost versus transferred. Yeah. I mean, yes, you might not have access to it anymore, but a lot of people really believe that money disappears.
Yeah. So I learned that concept, and that sort of changed everything for me. And I don't consider myself the most competitive person. I'm very competitive with myself. I'm always trying to improve. I don't have to be the best person, but I like to be one of the best if I could. But the fact that somebody else got...
Sounds like you're like a recovering competitor. You're like,
maybe.
I don't have to be the best, just one of the best.
One of the best, But well, right now,
number 2 in the world's fine with me.
I told you I just started playing tennis about 6 months ago because my daughter wanted to play, and at first we're just playing, and I just kind of sucked and whatever. But now I've started kind of going out and doing like some group play and stuff like that. And I'm like the worst guy there, and like I'm like, okay, this isn't working for me. So now I'm like, lessons. I'm out there every day. I'm like, I don't have to be the best guy on the court, but like I need to be able to at least play with those guys, right? So, but anyway, the fact that someone else got my money didn't sit real well with me. So I'm like, okay, great. So there's these types of events that create these wealth transfers. They happen during economic crises. They happen during maybe with the baby boomer generation transferring wealth. They happen during technological revolutions. There's certain events that trigger these. So how can I figure out what these wealth transfer events are, and how can I position myself to be on the receiving end of them? Sounds like a way better opportunity. Yep. And so that became my focus. Wealth transfers, what are they? How do they work? How do I get on the receiving end of these things? So I'm doing this. I became a gold bug. Started listening to Mike Maloney and Peter Schiff, and it's fiat currency. I didn't even know what that was. It's fiat currency. They're printing too much money. We need to go back to a sound money standard. 2009, Ron Paul's like, end the Fed. So all this starts kind of coming to my forefront. I have to now build into my financial education because I didn't really have that. I knew the business side, but I didn't understand that. So then I started buying newsletters. Stansberry Research was like my main go-to. Some of the Agora newsletters. I read Porter Stansberry's Friday Digest like every single week, like religiously, like really trying to absorb all this. And so anyway, I'm in the financial space. I'm in the lead gen space. I'm doing marketing. I'm still sort of using technology to do that. And still with PTSD from 2008, I started reading this newsletter called Sovereign Man. Mm-hmm. And Sovereign Man's thesis is like, you wouldn't put all your money into one stock. So why would you put all your life into one country? So why wouldn't, in today's digital age, why not have bank accounts in Singapore and Hong Kong and Panama? And why not have gold in vaults in other countries? And why not have multiple passports? And so I'm like, yeah. The banks are going to collapse. They didn't fix the problem. It's only getting worse. So in 2015, I was this is still very instrumental in sort of my worldview today. And so it's like, I want to be sovereign, and sovereign means for me, it means I can direct my life in the way I see fit, in a way that leads to my ends. Coercion is the opposite. Coercion is take the jab or lose your job. So either one is your choices. And the only way that I can be free of coercion is if I have options. So California wants to lock me down. Cool. I'll go to my place in Texas. U.S. wants to do it to me. Great. I'll go to Mexico. Right. So I need to have those options. And so that's still very instrumental. And anyway, 2015, I was working. He has like a network, sort of like what you do, and he can connect you with people to set up offshore trusts and offshore bank accounts. So I was working on a one in Panama, and I just took another look at Bitcoin, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is actually the shortcut to what I'm trying to achieve. I'm trying to get money out of the banking system.
Right.
Nobody wants a drill. They want the hole. I didn't want the Panama bank account. I wanted money out of the U.S. So I was like, okay, so Bitcoin's the same thing. It's a way for me to get money out. So let me buy some. But then what happens is, where you put your money, you put your attention. I start paying attention to it. All of a sudden now I'm buying at $300. It starts going up. Wow, what is this? I better figure it out. And then it clicked for me. This is a tool of how we win. This is how humanity frees themselves from this ever growing, ever
I
increasing.
think it's a gift to humanity.
It's a gift to humanity. And I'm like, this is how we win. And you have, you got the libertarians, you got the gold bugs, and they're all hoping one day things change, but there's no way to do that. There's no tool. And all of a sudden we have a tool. We have a tool now. And so I'm like, wow. And, I'm a freedom guy. So I'm like, okay, money out of the bank, money international. And now we have a tool that we can win for freedom. Like, I'm all in. Now I got to start telling
you can even have it on you in your head, as long as you have access to a computer.
Yeah, so there's two sides of it. Right. And so there's certainly, like, for me, I can preserve my wealth that way. So there's that.
Right.
But as we talked about last night in a deeper, like, political thing, it's like having kids changed everything for me. And I'm much more focused on my kids' future and my grandkids' future at this point. And so I'm like, this is a tool that we can win with. Mm-hmm. So cool. It's cool for me. I got enough money right now. I'll just disappear down to Nicaragua. I'll surf and fish every day. You'll never see me again. But how does it help my kids?
Right.
So anyway, so now we have a tool that we can win. I got to start telling people about. So then I start just telling friends and family, and only people that I thought would be interested. I don't want to talk to people who wouldn't be interested. And then it was like, I was answering the same question over. So I'm like, well, I'm an internet guy. How about I just put up a video and you can watch it? And then it was like, what other coins do you buy? And so I'm start tracking it. And then I got into this like newsletter niche. So I just sort of kind of fell into it, which is sort of how life is, right? We just kind of like find our way. So that was about 2016 is when I really started talking about it pretty heavily. 2017, I started really making videos. And, here we are now, 7, 8 years later, and I'm speaking on the biggest stages, talking about Bitcoin.
Let's talk more about Bitcoin since we're on the topic. Let's break it down. Why it's such a valuable, scarce resource. You've mentioned some of these things. Like, I remember the first time I heard a speech on it. They're like, the way that the banking system, there's like 9 properties of how you can, have money. Like, because you can have it in a digital form, you can transfer all this kind of stuff. But they were like, Bitcoin has 2 more properties. And I was like, well, what's that?
Yeah.
One was that it was scarce and not just being printed at any time.
So we were talking earlier, and you were saying you're not really into politics, you're more into the philosophy. Mm-hmm. And so, unfortunately, to understand success and wealth and money, you have to get into the philosophy of things. Totally. You need to break things down to like a first principles level, and you have to understand incentives. And so what most people in the financial world miss, there's so many people I talk to that are way smarter than me into the inner working plumbings of the financial system and the euro dollar market, but they're so in the weeds that they can't understand other factors. And I think they miss the big picture. I've thought that I'm more of like this generalist. This last summer, I took my family to Europe for a month and we went to Florence, and I realized I'm not a generalist. I'm a Renaissance man. But it's really having the ability to understand 7 or 8 different disciplines.
Isn't that where they created the ledger? Was in Florence, that's where the whole
the Renaissance started there. But it was also the invention of the ledger, double entry accounting. There's a bunch of parallels to Renaissance. We call it Renaissance 2.0. But the Renaissance, part of what led to the Renaissance was that they had the invention of money, but they had the florin, which was a gold coin, and it was the longest lasting gold coin that was not debased. 400 years without debasement, which led to massive flourishment. We've never seen that again. The U.S. dollar has lost 95% of its value in less than 100 years. In Rome, the silver denarius, they lost 95% silver within 200 years. The U.S. did it in half the time. But the florin lasted 400 years without debasement. Anyway, it's a different story. So anyway, but you do have to understand these different disciplines, otherwise you miss it. So some of the things are, for example, like, what is even money? What is even money? Now, what is it? How has it been used historically? But then philosophically, what is even money in the first place? Like, why do we need something to exchange? What is it, right?
Which my definition of it, we'll go back and forth, is it's a man-made tool of efficiency. It's a way, it represents value. So from the past as a store, right? And in the present. And so it represents value, but it's not what makes us valuable. That's where people get confused, is money is not power or value. It's a representation of it. So someone can inherit money and really not have much power because they don't have the human life value for it.
But let me ask you a deeper philosophical question. It's a store of value, but what's value?
Right. Value is perspective.
Okay.
Value is perspective. And so money, when we exchange money freely, I was telling you this yesterday, it means that we both agreed that that's what it was not worth.
Right.
So if
both sides got the upper hand.
Right. If you let's say you bought coffee today, you're saying that that coffee was worth more than the money you gave. The person that's serving the coffee is saying it's worth less.
Coffee, yeah.
So you both end up wealthier in that exchange. And that's what's cool is when we have mental capital and that we could develop that, we can create a lot of value through scale and leverage that really benefits someone. Like I once went to buy I was going to do a triathlon. Actually, Garrett White talked me into it. And so I go to get this carbon fiber, bike, and it was like $4,700 or something, or $5,700. And I thought, man, that's expensive. And then the second I said expensive, I was like, how much technology, time, and human life value went for this to be created? It would take someone more than a lifetime to do it because of all the collaboration, all the hours. And I was like, actually, it's really inexpensive and efficient because of that. And money is such an effective way for me to just be able to exchange that because I could earn that.
You got caught
so much
looking
easier
at the price and not the value.
Right. And I feel like the measure of worth breaks down into three things. One is price. That's what we pay. That's where a lot of people get stuck. And that's why they get stuck in consumerism and that they spend way too much time trying to save money rather than create value. The second thing is cost. Cost is the economic impact. So something can be low price and high cost. For example,
a boat.
Right. Or just you could have a lower price walking to the airport today versus me driving you there. Lower price, much higher cost because of all the time and energy.
Yeah.
And then value is the third consideration. And value is a feeling of satisfaction or joy, or it's perspective. Mm-hmm. And so like the only thing I believe that has inherent value is life. Mm-hmm. Like that's inherent value.
Yeah. So if I said, hey, Garrett, you want to buy my used iPhone for $2,000? You're like, why would I do that? That's an expensive price. Well, this has my Bitcoin wallet on there. There's $100,000 of Bitcoin in there.
Great.
So the value is good, right? Anyway, so let's another way I look at it, if we want to go philosophical here.
Yeah.
Because money is like energy.
Exactly.
So it's a store of energy.
Mm-hmm.
So the law of energy is energy can't be created. It can only be transferred, right? So we get energy out of the ground, we transform it into a gas, right? And if I eat food, those are calories in my body. So if I think about this philosophically, imagine I had like this rare form of diabetes where I couldn't store fat. So fat is like a battery. So if I couldn't store fat, I'd have to eat calories all day. Otherwise I'd starve to death. But if I have enough calories, I store fat, and fat's like a battery that now I can live for an extra 4 days.
You can access energy. And
Now, if I had to dig a hole for 4 hours, I'm expending those calories. Calories are units of energy.
Yep.
I'm expending that calories. I work for 4 hours. I earn enough to sustain me for the day. But let's say that I want to work an extra 4 hours that day. So I've expended extra energy. Where do I store that energy? In money.
Right.
So money is a store of energy, store of value. It's all these things. So you have to look at it from different perspectives. But if I think of it as like a store of energy, it's my life's energy I put into that. It's my life's battery.
Right. And this is why, we can get deep in this philosophical conversation.
But it's important.
But this is where if people remove themselves from the understanding of the value at the center and just start thinking about the money, they miss the entire point and are more likely to become victims or blame or not take responsibility or not develop skills and think, I'm owed this because I want to feel secure, but not realizing someone else would have to provide energy and value for that to happen.
Think right now today in the United States, they're saying that healthcare is a human right. How can I have a right to someone else's labor?
That's exactly what they're saying, but not understanding that's what they're saying.
Which is why I know some people are like, dude, just here's the common thing in Bitcoin. Explain Bitcoin to me like I'm 5 and in 2 minutes. It's like, bro, like there's just some things in life that are deeper than that. And if you want to understand money and the financial system and fiat currency and if you want to understand that, you have to go down to the base layer.
Right.
If you don't go down to first principles, you're just reciting off of what someone else has told you.
I want to go a little bit deeper on this. Let's say that people believed that healthcare is a right. So let's see how that plays out. That only plays out in one conclusion at the extreme, which is slavery.
Yeah.
You have to force someone, and force, even if someone has the talent, diminishes that talent.
Of course.
Freedom is where people, like, I watch it with my 18-year-old. He just has found his own way in certain things, and he just does it. Yep. There's I don't have to manage it. I don't have to worry about it because he found purpose in it.
Exactly.
So he chose into it. when he was younger and I was trying to have him do some of these things, it required so much energy because he hadn't adopted and bought into it. So force is never as powerful as freedom and flow.
Yeah.
You know, and so
I think about like I was talking to you in this analogy of this Bitcoin thing that I'm writing is like money as a game, and breaking that down. Jordan Peterson, you saw him the other night. He talks about the game, and the game is if all of us are willingly playing the game, we're all enjoying the game, we're all having fun playing the game, and we're all doing our best to play that game. But what happens is if we're stuck in a game we don't want to play, some people have to be removed from the game to become enforcers of the game. So now we have less people playing the game because now some people are the enforcers of the game. And then the people that are being forced to play at a lower level, to the point that you're saying, right?
Right.
So if you think about it like that, like we want to all be willingly in a free market playing the game to our best ability where we like to play.
And think about that from a standpoint of how people treat their money. This notion of I will trade my time for money, save 10% of it, wait for 30 years, and then finally live my life. What happens is this is why this is one of the hidden factors of chronic illness, because if we go back to the 1980s, like 9% of the US had chronic illness. We're at 54% now. That's a massive difference. Now we can talk about environment. We could talk about,
fiat money,
vaccination.
Fiat food.
We could talk about processed food, all this kind of stuff. But one of the things that we really would have to examine and consider is I think that 3 factors that impact health dramatically are purpose. And if we're trading time for money and feel no purpose in that other than feel forced because we have to provide, is that the story?
Pay our college debt.
College debt, student loan. Number 2, relationships. When people are tired because they're trading time for money and exhausted, it diminishes their relationships. If we went just to basic health principles, if we're chronically stressed, we're in a sympathetic state, which creates us to be the worst version of who we are.
Right.
Because we're fatigued, because we're more irritable, we're going to be more grouchy, versus if we're loving what we do in some way, shape, or form, then we're going to be in a more parasympathetic state, often, which the body recovers and heals, and we show up better because we're talking energy.
Right.
So we have purpose, we have relationships, and then money.
Yeah.
Like if we if we don't feel like we're in the driver's seat of those 3 things, it will create terrible health.
Yeah.
And then what happens is people live long and sick by just supplementing it with a bunch of side effect, which there's no such thing as side effect, just effect, by the way.
Yeah.
Pills.
Unintended consequence.
Right. So this money as energy thing, we have to look at career and life energy.
Right.
And what's hard, and you talked about this with me yesterday, is some people just aren't willing to invest a lot of energy before the payoff comes.
Right. The problem with the wage slaves is they can't imagine working for free.
Well, it's like people want passive income today with just luck, not being active in the role of becoming a better investor.
Right.
And then the world's narrative has been, you don't have time. You're not smart enough. Just hand us your money.
Yeah.
And they're giving away their energy to the wolves of Wall Street.
Right.
Like it's crazy when you look at the system and you go, here's the game that's being played.
Yeah.
It's not really in your favor if you're just asleep.
Right.
And if you understand how the game's played, you can actually use it to your advantage. Yeah. So anyway, I know we're all over the place getting Bitcoin here.
But let's talk about the energy. But just playing on that energy. So I've expended my life's energy, into this work, and I've now storing that in this energy. Now, what type of battery am I putting it in? Is it a nickel cad battery? Is it a lithium battery? So how good is that battery at storing my wealth? Now, most people...
if that battery lost 95% of its value over 100 years... it lasted 100 years. That's okay. That's better than something that spoiled overnight.
Not really, because when you need it in 75 years, there's only 20% left.
Right. But I'm saying that it could have. There are worse situations. It's not great.
So then, most people are storing their money, their value in fiat currency. And fiat currency is losing its value through inflation.
Right.
So inflation is a leak in the system. You talked about yesterday, like plugging the holes for more efficiency. The fiat currency system, US dollars or whatever currency you have, has an inefficiency built in where they want a 2% inflation leak, a 2% leak of the battery. That's 10% over 5 years. Now it's way higher than that. In some nations, it's 100. I mean, dude, Venezuela is like 100%.
Zimbabwe, as we talked about.
Yeah. So then you think about that, and then think about, I mean, this is jumping to another level, but like think about the drain on society, because what happens is through specialization, I want to be the best brain surgeon. I want to go cure cancer. I want to go create this new AI, whatever it is. And so I should be able to specialize in that. And then what I should be able to do is take that energy I've put into the brain surgery or the AI, and then with that wealth I've created, I should be able to save it in my life battery. But because our life battery is leaking, I have to now go be an investor. Mm-hmm. And now, instead of being the best at whatever my specialization is, now I have to be half of that and then part investor. And think about the amount of brain drain that we've lost in society just to manage the loss of that battery, of that energy, as opposed to if we were able to store our wealth in a battery that did not leak, how much more production or how much more progress we could have and how much further ahead we could be.
And people that are stuck in the game, not knowing the game, think that there's one option of what to do to handle this leaking of the battery.
Well, either I have to divert half my attention to it, or I go give it to Wall Street.
Give it to Wall Street is the default, because if we said investing, give me a synonym, the first word that the majority of the population says is stocks.
Yeah.
It's something I have no money in, you have no money in.
And that's a pretty new phenomenon. I mean, it's only been since about the 70s or 80s that really the U.S. population's been into that.
Well, and think of how it came about. It came about, and I'm not going to go into all the detail here, but part of it came from the failure of the system created the system. So pensions, right? There's these pensions, and people are like, oh, cool. If I get this job and I work here, I'm going to get this pension. Mm-hmm. But what happened is the pensions speculated too heavily and didn't understand disinvesting.
Well, but they were forced to do that because in order to get any type of yield to return that because of their inflation leak, they had to go further out on the risk curve.
Well, let me tell you that they got greedy, not forced. Let me tell you, this is how it worked.
Both happened.
Both. But I'll just give one really prime example. In the 1950s, GE was like, how do we recruit the best executives? Because we're not number one or two in some of our categories. And the only way we're going to get there is by better recruitment. How are we going to bring those people here? And they had a financial model where they said, what we're going to do is we're going to tell them we'll give them a pension if they're here for at least 7 years. Because they're talking about hiring people in their 50s, right? Mm-hmm. The best of the best. That's the interesting thing in business. Usually you gain, it's not like the NBA where the longer you go, eventually you start telling off.
Well, that's true in business too. The age is a little bit further out.
But it's just, you actually are more likely to have at 50, be way more valuable than you were at 20.
Right.
But in basketball, you're way more valuable at 20 than you were at 50. There's just a different cycle. Sure. So what they did was they said, we'll give you this pension. Well, how did they fund the pension? They bought life insurance, just permanent life insurance on them. They used the cash value to supplement the pension. And then when they died, the death benefit came in tax-free, giving them somewhere between a 3 to 6% yield tax-free, which replenished everything that they spent and gave them a positive return. And then they had these people come and say, why would you be doing insurance? It's slow, it's low yielding. You should put your money in the market. And initially it worked. They put their money in the market. And when they didn't have to pay for the pension, it went really well because it outperformed the insurance.
Sure.
But now when they had to start allocating funds, the problem is in disinvesting, if the market goes down and you pull it out, it does this really quick cliff because you're taking it while it's down to pay for the pension. And so what they did is they said, look, pensions are really dangerous for us. So let's go ahead and put the onerous on the employee, because employees said, why do the executives get pensions? We want pensions, right? That's how healthcare came about. All of us, I was like, is going to be for the most valuable to the firm. And then it was like, hey, that's unfair that everybody doesn't get it. They cry for it. It's kind of a socialistic tendency. And so what happens is they blow up the pensions because of poor investing performance and disinvesting. So now they go, let's just offer this 401k, and all we have to do is give them a match, and now the responsibility is on them. But we know the responsibility is not taken because they don't know what's going on. I mean, in 1980, if you and I interviewed someone and we said, hey, you're going to have this thing called a 401k, you're going to put money in it. When you retire 30 years from now, what's a good amount that you think would be in the plan? What would make you feel good? What do you think people would say?
I don't know, $1 million?
$1 million, right? That would be the high end. Okay, now we're here today interviewing those people. how did that $1 million serve you?
Yeah, you're not going to do good at all with
Right.
$1 million.
So
obviously, depending on where you live, right? But
right, but that's and so what happened is all of a sudden people are automatically putting money. And part of the reason why we had such a run up in the 90s, yeah, there was good economic times, but there's also a run up in the market because there were tons of deposits coming in automatically without thinking about it, with restrictions. It was the government's money and the individual's money. It really helped boost that for a long period of time.
Yeah. And now with the baby boomers retiring, we could start to see that unwind because per the government law, they have to start divesting that or pulling money out of that. So anyway, it's important to start there because one, you need to understand what money and value transfer is. And I like to think of it from a philosophical level. Yes, value, but energy, my life's energy. I need to store it in a way that doesn't leak so I can do other things.
I by the way, just love how elegant you made that. I want to store it in a way that it doesn't leak.
Yeah.
And I just want to just break that down because it's such an important point. The leaks aren't just the loss of the battery. It's risk. It's fear if we're putting it in places that we don't understand that keep us up at night. There's multiple leaks because if money's energy and we're storing energy there, but we're investing in things we know nothing about, that's actually gambling, and that can harm us because of stress, lack of sleep, frustration. Yeah. I mean, the number one reason listed for divorce, they say, is finance.
Yeah. And so inflation has ruined a lot of things, including society, because the number one cause of divorce being money. There's a website called WTF Happened 1971. And all it is just a whole page of charts. That's it. And every single chart has an arrow pointing at 1971, and it's all flat and then a hockey stick. Unwed mothers, incarceration rate, obesity rate, divorce rate. Everything, 1971 spike.
From going fiat.
From going fiat.
Wow.
So
I've never seen that.
Yeah, WTF Happened. She can pull it up and put it on this thing. But anyway, go check that out. But anyway, so the reason why you start there is because we have to understand what it is and we have to understand the problem because solutions are supposed to come to problems. I say supposed to because today's world, we have money chasing problems that don't need to be solved. But typically we're supposed to solve problems, right? Okay, so the money.
I like that, money chasing problems that don't need to be solved.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we saw with blockchain, and now we're seeing with AI. Is I get emails every day. Oh, this AI, and they're trying to take this AI, and what can we go solve with AI? It's not how it works, man. I have a problem. I don't care if you wrote it in Python or JavaScript or blockchain or AI. I don't care. Does it solve my need? Right. So anyway,
but part of that is just get the greed gland going is right. what it is.
But
right?
for us as investors, people need to be able to look past the buzzwords, right, and understand.
Right, because people want here's a point. People are in a place where they're trying to make up for lost time. They're trying to make up for past mistakes, and it's almost like a team that's losing at the end of a basketball game. Now they're putting on the full court press. They're chucking up shots really fast, and that's what happens with people with money. They get to a place where oh, I should be further along. I'm not. Oh, AI, maybe that's the solution. I'm going to jump into that because maybe this will make up for all the past stuff, and they actually take bigger risks and more mistakes.
It's partly that, but why are they so far behind? Well, they're so far behind
in a faulty system.
They're in a faulty system. They weren't taught what the game is.
They don't know.
Been playing the game, and the game is working against them. So back in this game of money,
like inflation being part of that
if
game.
I'm playing this game, my goal is to build wealth, but built into the game are two mechanisms that constantly steal my wealth that I'm working against. Right. So anyway, that's taxes and inflation, by the way. All right. So we understand that. But
and by the way, like your solution for inflation, I want to get into, and my solution is get really strategic around taxes.
Yeah. So taxes and inflation. But back to they're in a faulty game, and the game has been rigged. So I told you a quote last night. Vladimir Lenin from Russia, him and John Maynard Keynes, father of Keynesian economics, he said that the best way to destroy capitalism was to debauch the currency, devalue it, debase it, through inflation. And through inflation, we can arbitrarily steal wealth silently and hidden.
Right.
And we can continue until the relationship with money is broken, until the best way to get rich is through gambling and theft. So back to, I need to go into AI because to make up for the past mistakes. Well, partly past mistakes because you didn't know the game you're in. You weren't taught it. But also the system was set up purposely so that it destroyed the system that worked. And the only way to get rich would be to gamble. So there's a lot of things going on there.
Yeah, and good point. Like inflation's the stealth tax. Yeah. It's a tax. It's just a stealth tax. It's if it's kind of like someone in a mutual fund. they don't know that they're paying fees every month. They are.
You're going to like this. You're going to like this. So,
It's just hidden from them. And then on the other side, you know, when it comes to inflation, it's like, it just happens where if they have to write a check for tax, or if, you know, they feel the pain more. Hey, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. And if you're enjoying these videos, well, there's good news. More where that came from. So go ahead and click through and watch the next video now.